Picture the quiet reverence of the temple, a place where Israel's people sought refuge, forgiveness, and connection with God. Eli, the priest, was entrusted with the responsibility to guide them, to be a bridge between their prayers and the divine. But within the walls of this sacred place, an unsettling shadow was growing, a shadow created by the actions of Eli's own sons. Their disregard for the holy, combined with Eli's silence, would soon unravel the peace and sanctity of the temple. What unfolds in Eli's story is a cautionary tale of love, compromise, and legacy. Through his journey, we discover lessons that resonate powerfully, inviting us to reflect on the weight of our own choices. As we dive into the life of Eli, let's open our hearts to the insights that God has for each of us, for there is much to learn in this story of honor, heartbreak, and redemption. Imagine the early days of Eli's life as a priest. He wasn't just an ordinary man. He was chosen to serve in a role of immense importance, a mediator between the people and God. Eli knew that being a priest was more than performing daily rituals. It was a calling to lead spiritually, to guide souls seeking God. But as a human, Eli also carried the weight of his limitations. Would he too be vulnerable to failure? Perhaps at some point he asked himself, "Am I truly worthy of this grand calling?" Eli had responsibilities that few could fully understand. In the beginning, he likely felt a mixture of honor and trembling. After all, he knew that the weight of the priesthood meant more than guiding the people. It meant being spiritually vigilant, seeking God's wisdom to navigate challenges, and guarding the hearts of his own family. Did he have any idea just how difficult this task would become? Years passed, and Eli fulfilled his role with dedication. He watched as crowds of Israelites brought their offerings and prayers, pouring into them their hopes, regrets, and pleas for help. Yet the office of priest carried subtle dangers: fatigue, routine, and perhaps even a sense of complacency. It's easy to forget, amidst so many obligations, that faith requires constant renewal. In his heart, Eli must have felt the pressure of being not only a leader to the nation, but also a responsible father. What he perhaps didn't know was that the same position that earned him respect among the people would also bring immense family challenges. His sons, Hophni and Phinehas, did not share his reverence for the calling. As they grew older, their actions showed a disturbing disregard for the priesthood. But Eli, entangled in so many responsibilities, hesitated to take the necessary steps to correct them. Did he underestimate the danger? While Eli dedicated himself to the people, his sons began to stray from the values he represented. Here, Eli's dilemma emerges, between his love for his sons and his commitment to God. What do you do when those who should follow in your footsteps choose paths of corruption and abuse of power? Was Eli fully aware of the devastating impact his son's behavior would have on the faith of the people? Thus, Eli's role as both priest and father became a crossroads of emotional and spiritual dilemmas. He bore the responsibility not only of maintaining a covenant with God, but also of protecting his family from dangerous paths. As we dive deeper into this story, we're led to reflect: how far are we willing to go to safeguard what has been entrusted to us? Influence is a powerful force, especially in families. Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, grew up surrounded by the sacred traditions of the priesthood, watching their father guide the people in faith. But somehow, along the way, something shifted. The weight of their father's influence began to lose its grip. Maybe Eli believed that simply being around the temple and its teachings would be enough to shape his son's character. Yet, influence isn't just what we say, it's what we live out daily. And in his desire to be both a father and a priest, Eli may have struggled to show the strength needed to lead both at home and in the temple. Eli's position brought him respect, but with respect came responsibility. His sons had inherited a powerful legacy, yet they chose to misuse their roles, taking advantage of the people and corrupting the offerings intended for God. They became known for their greed and arrogance, acting as if the priesthood was a means for personal gain rather than a divine calling. It was as if their hearts had turned away from everything their father stood for. How heartbreaking it must have been for Eli to watch his sons drift so far from the path he had hoped they'd walk. This painful reality reminds us that influence without guidance can lead to destruction. Eli may have loved his sons deeply, but sometimes love requires hard decisions. His hesitance to correct them left a gap, a space where rebellion and corruption took root. When we leave a gap between our values and our actions, it's easy for the people closest to us to become confused about what truly matters. This was Eli's challenge, a challenge that many of us can relate to in our own lives. Influence works in two directions. It can either uplift or undermine. Eli's sons might have been drawn to the respect and authority that came with the priesthood, but without a foundation of genuine reverence, they saw it as a position of privilege rather than service. Their influence began to seep out into the community, and soon their behavior was damaging the people's faith, sowing seeds of doubt and mistrust. And for Eli, the realization of this harm must have been a painful awakening. Reflecting on Eli's story, we are reminded of the importance of intentional influence. Influence doesn't just happen, it's shaped by choices, by daily commitment to live out our values. If Eli had chosen to confront his sons earlier, perhaps their paths might have taken a different direction. And yet hindsight shows us what Eli likely feared in the moment, that confrontation might mean division. Was it better to risk the relationship or to risk the calling? As we leave this moment in Eli's story, we can feel the weight of his dilemma. Influence is precious, a gift that must be protected and nurtured. And Eli's experience serves as a powerful reminder. How we influence others shapes not only their lives, but also our legacy. In the midst of the corruption brought by his sons, Eli received a warning, a message sent directly from God through a prophet. This wasn't just any message, it was a clear and piercing call to change. Imagine Eli listening to this prophet, feeling the weight of the words sink deep into his heart. God was giving him a chance to set things right, to intervene before the damage became irreversible. And yet Eli hesitated. Why do we sometimes ignore warnings, even when we know they are meant to protect us? The prophet's message was unambiguous. If Eli did not act, his family would face severe consequences. God's voice, through the prophet, reached out to him not in anger, but with an urgency that revealed God's desire for Eli's repentance and change. This was Eli's moment to step in and demonstrate a father's love that could both correct and protect. But perhaps Eli found himself torn, unable to balance his duties as a father and as a priest. It's a struggle many of us face when our love for others conflicts with the hard choices we know we need to make. Ignoring warnings often stems from a deep desire to avoid conflict, or from a hope that things will resolve on their own. Eli may have clung to this hope, thinking that his sons would eventually change their ways without his intervention. But God's warning was a clear indication that change wouldn't come without action. Eli had a choice: to confront his son's behavior or to leave things as they were. By choosing silence, Eli left room for corruption to grow, affecting not only his family but also the entire community. The prophet's warning served as a mirror, reflecting the consequences that would arise if Eli remained passive. Yet Eli's response, or lack thereof, speaks volumes about the struggles within his heart. How many times do we, too, avoid looking into that mirror, fearing the truths it reveals? God's message was not just for Eli, but for all who witnessed this moment, reminding them of the importance of heeding divine counsel. It was a reminder that ignoring guidance can lead to painful repercussions. Eli's story is a profound lesson on the cost of disregarding divine direction. Sometimes God sends warnings not as punishment, but as invitations to realign with his path, to make choices that will protect what we cherish. If Eli had acted on this warning, the course of his family's story might have changed dramatically. God's call to him was one of mercy, offering him a chance to protect his legacy and his sons from their own downfall. As we conclude this chapter of Eli's journey, we're left with an invitation to reflect. How many times have we ignored gentle nudges from God, hoping things would work out on their own? When God sends warnings, they come with a purpose: to guide, protect, and restore. If this message has touched your heart, share in the comments how faith has guided you through your own challenges, or simply comment guidance to let us know you're walking this journey with us. And if this story resonates, subscribe to our channel to continue exploring these powerful lessons from the Bible. Eli's love for his sons was deep, but sometimes love can create blind spots. In his role as both father and priest, Eli faced a unique challenge, seeing his son's faults without letting his affection cloud his judgment. It's hard to confront those we love, especially when that confrontation might strain the relationship. But Eli's inaction allowed corruption to grow unchecked. How often do we, too, ignore the small signs, hoping they'll simply disappear with time? Eli's decision to remain silent, to avoid conflict with his sons, was a choice that came with serious consequences. His sons were abusing their power, acting in ways that were harmful to the faith and the people they were meant to serve. By not stepping in, Eli allowed this behavior to take root and flourish, affecting the entire community. His reluctance to correct his sons' behavior not only damaged their relationship with God, but also put a strain on the people's trust in the priesthood. It's a stark reminder that our choices, or lack thereof, can ripple far beyond what we see. Blind spots in relationships are common. They're the areas where we overlook issues out of love, loyalty, or fear of conflict. Eli likely hoped his sons would change on their own. But love sometimes requires us to make hard choices, to put aside our fear of losing closeness for the greater good. This was Eli's challenge, to confront out of love rather than to permit out of fear. The story of Eli and his sons reminds us that ignoring issues in the name of peace can lead to greater turmoil in the end. The consequences of Eli's inaction went beyond his family. The people began to lose faith, questioning the integrity of those who led them in worship. Eli's unwillingness to address his son's actions created a widening gap between the priests and the community. It's a powerful example of how inaction can erode trust and faith, leading to a deep sense of disillusionment. This wasn't just a family matter, it was a crisis that affected an entire nation's spiritual foundation. Eli's blind spot shows us the importance of courage in relationships. Ignoring problems may feel easier in the short term, but it can lead to far greater heartache in the future. The painful truth is that sometimes love requires us to confront, to guide, and to protect, even when it means difficult conversations. Eli's story encourages us to examine our own blind spots, to ask ourselves if there are areas in our relationships where we've chosen silence over action. As we close this chapter of Eli's journey, we're reminded of the cost of avoiding responsibility. Eli's inaction not only affected his sons, but also weakened the faith of the people he was called to serve. Let us reflect on the courage needed to address issues, even when it's uncomfortable. How often have we allowed our love to blind us to important truths? As we move forward, may we be inspired to protect our own legacies with courage and love. For the people of Israel, the temple was a place of reverence, a sanctuary where they could draw closer to God. It was a place where they sought forgiveness, peace, and guidance. But under the influence of Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, the temple became something else entirely. Instead of a house of prayer, it started to resemble a place where greed and corruption overshadowed holiness. It's heartbreaking to imagine how the people must have felt, coming to seek God and instead encountering abuse and injustice. Can we even imagine the damage done when those trusted with sacred duties betray that trust? Hophni and Phinehas took advantage of their positions, misusing the offerings and treating the rituals of worship with contempt. They seized the best portions of sacrifices for themselves, disregarding the people's devotion and God's commands. The temple became a place where selfishness reigned instead of sanctity. In their actions, we see the tragic consequence of unchecked power, a reminder of how sacred spaces can be tainted when those in authority lose their fear of God. Their corruption didn't just harm their own souls, it affected the entire community. The people began to feel a sense of disillusionment, as if their prayers and offerings were meaningless in the face of such blatant disrespect. The actions of Eli's sons turned what should have been a holy encounter into a painful experience, causing a rupture between the people and their faith. How heartbreaking it must have been for Eli to watch this unfold, knowing he had a role in allowing it to happen. The corruption of the sacred is a powerful warning. Sacred responsibilities require humility and reverence, and when leaders misuse their roles, it leaves scars on those who trust them. Hophni and Phinehas's actions were not just mistakes, they were deliberate choices that defiled their roles. It's a reminder to all of us of the importance of honoring the roles we're given and the people who rely on our integrity. In failing to uphold these values, Eli's sons brought shame to their family and pain to the community. Eli's lack of intervention allowed this behavior to continue unchecked, tarnishing the spiritual environment he was meant to protect. His sons' actions are a sobering example of what happens when sacred roles are taken for granted. And as the people's trust in the priesthood dwindled, the spiritual foundation of Israel grew weaker. It's a profound reminder that our actions, especially in roles of influence, carry consequences that reach far beyond ourselves. As we reflect on this chapter in Eli's story, we're encouraged to consider our own roles and responsibilities. Are we honoring the trust placed in us? Are we mindful of the impact our choices have on others? Eli's sons serve as a reminder of the importance of integrity, a call to all of us to protect what is sacred in our own lives. Imagine coming to the temple with a heart full of hope, only to be met with disappointment and doubt. The people of Israel came to the temple seeking connection with God, but under the influence of Hophni and Phinehas, that sacred experience was marred. Instead of finding peace, they found corruption. Instead of holiness, they witnessed abuse. It's a painful reality when those we trust to guide us in faith become the very reason our faith begins to waver. How could the people feel close to God when those representing him acted so far from his ways? The actions of Eli's sons created a deep divide, planting seeds of distrust within the hearts of the people. They began to question if their offerings even mattered, if their prayers were heard, or if their devotion was in vain. Their faith, once steadfast, became overshadowed by doubt. They came with open hearts, only to have them wounded by those who should have protected the sanctity of their worship. This moment serves as a powerful reminder of how deeply our actions affect others, especially when we are entrusted with their spiritual care. Eli's failure to intervene only deepened the people's distrust. As their leader, his silence spoke volumes. They looked to him to restore order, to bring integrity back to the temple. But when he remained passive, they began to lose hope, feeling as though there was no one left to guide them. This wasn't just a loss of trust in Hophni and Phinehas. It was a loss of trust in the entire priesthood, in the very institution meant to connect them with God. Eli's reluctance to act sent a painful message to the people that their concerns and perhaps even their faith were insignificant. When trust is broken, it's not easily mended. The people's faith, shaken by Eli's sons, needed restoration, a way to reconnect with the holiness they longed for. But without accountability, without a leader willing to correct wrongs, the temple remained a place of wounded trust. This brokenness didn't just affect Eli's family, it became a wound in the spiritual heart of Israel. How many times do we see similar struggles today, where faith is shaken by the actions of those trusted to uphold it? The story of Eli and his sons reminds us that trust is a precious, fragile gift, one that must be guarded with care. When those in authority take advantage of their positions, it leaves a lasting impact on those who look to them for guidance. It's a call to all of us to handle the trust given to us with reverence, to ensure that our actions build faith rather than tear it down. As we move forward in Eli's story, we're led to consider the ways in which our own actions influence others' faith. Are we strengthening those who look to us, or are we causing them to question what they believe? Let us take this lesson to heart, remembering the importance of living out our values with integrity. In the stillness of a sacred moment, Eli received a message that would forever alter his family's fate. A man of God came to him with a prophecy, a revelation of God's judgment upon Eli's house. It was a message both heartbreaking and terrifying, yet it was also a result of choices left uncorrected. Imagine Eli's heart sinking as he listened, realizing that his silence and his son's actions had led to this. How do we react when faced with the consequences of our own inaction? The prophecy was clear. Because Eli had allowed his sons to corrupt the priesthood, his family line would be cut off. No longer would his descendants serve in the temple. Eli's family, once honored, would bear the burden of this judgment. This wasn't a judgment made in haste. It was a painful declaration of what happens when responsibilities are neglected. God's words weren't merely a punishment. They were a reflection of the seriousness of Eli's role and the trust that had been broken. This message must have weighed heavily on Eli. He was not just a father, he was a leader, and now he was facing the consequences of his leadership. The sorrow in this moment is palpable. A man of faith, realizing that his legacy, his sons, and his priesthood would all face loss because he had been unable to correct them. Sometimes God's judgments come as painful reminders of the responsibilities we hold, especially when those responsibilities affect others so deeply. Yet, even in judgment, there is a lesson. God's message to Eli wasn't just for him, it was for all who would witness it. It was a reminder of the high calling of leadership, of the importance of accountability, and of the consequences that come when we prioritize comfort over correction. Eli's story reveals the weight of leadership, showing us that neglecting hard truths can lead to even harder outcomes. For Eli, the prophecy was not just a warning, it was the painful reality of what happens when we fail to heed God's guidance. This prophecy served as both a reflection on the past and a caution for the future. It was a stark reminder of the seriousness of sacred duties and the cost of compromise. Through this judgment, God highlighted the importance of integrity, justice, and the need to protect what is holy. As we move to the next part of Eli's story, we're left with a profound reflection. Are we fully honoring the responsibilities given to us? God's message to Eli challenges us to consider the long-term impact of our actions, reminding us that what we do today can echo through generations. Let this serve as a call to embrace our roles with humility, courage, and an unwavering commitment to uphold what is right. As the prophecy unfolded, Eli's heart bore the weight of a tragic realization. His family's legacy, once a source of pride, was crumbling. The truth hit hard. His son's actions, his silence, and the judgment passed down were all leading to the downfall of a line that had once been honored by God. For a father and a priest, the pain was unimaginable. How do we face the reality that our choices and the choices of those we love have set in motion something irreversible? Eli's legacy was not just his own, it was his sons, his descendants, and even the people's. His family was meant to carry the priesthood forward, to be a light guiding others in faith. But now, Eli saw how his inaction had paved the way for their downfall. This was not a loss of possessions or status, it was the loss of something much deeper. For Eli, it was the loss of his family's spiritual legacy, a legacy meant to honor God and serve the people. In this painful moment, Eli understood that his silence had cost him more than he had ever anticipated. His son's corruption had tainted the priesthood, creating a breach of trust that would affect future generations. His family, once bound to the temple, would no longer hold the position he had worked so hard to uphold. This realization was a stark reminder that what we pass down is more than material wealth. It is the integrity, faith, and values we instill in those who follow. The collapse of Eli's legacy serves as a powerful reflection on the importance of intention and accountability. We are reminded that the choices we make today impact the future of those we love. Eli's pain was not only for himself, but for the generations that would feel the weight of his silence and his son's actions. It's a lesson that our legacy is built not only through our accomplishments, but also through our decisions to protect and nurture what is right. Eli's story invites us to reflect on our own legacies. What are we building? Are we protecting the values we hold dear, or are we allowing compromise to seep in? Legacy is fragile, and Eli's life shows us the importance of guarding it with vigilance. When we turn a blind eye to the behaviors that undermine our values, we risk losing the very essence of what we hope to pass on. As we move towards the closing chapters of Eli's story, we are left with a choice: to hold tightly to the values that define us, or to let them slip away. Eli's journey is a reminder to all of us to be intentional, to embrace accountability, and to protect the legacies we build for future generations. Eli's story is a cautionary tale that resonates beyond his time. It speaks to us today, reminding us of the cost of compromise and the dangers of neglecting our responsibilities. Eli's choices, his silence, and his son's actions became a lesson for all who came after him. A painful reminder of how easily compromise can erode what we hold dear. How many times do we, too, find ourselves at a crossroads, faced with the choice to uphold our values or to take the easier path of silence? The price of compromise isn't always immediate. It can slowly weave itself into the fabric of our lives, showing up in ways we least expect. For Eli, it came in the form of his son's corruption, the people's loss of faith, and the crumbling of his family's legacy. His story reminds us that every decision has a consequence, and every compromise we allow can have lasting effects on those who follow. It's a call to each of us to be vigilant, to hold fast to our principles, even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. Eli's legacy, though filled with sorrow, offers a powerful lesson on the importance of integrity. Compromise may seem like a way to avoid conflict or keep the peace, but in reality, it often plants seeds of discord that grow over time. Eli's failure to correct his sons created a ripple effect, affecting not only his family, but also the entire community's trust in God's appointed leaders. It's a reminder that our choices matter, that our actions set an example, especially for those who look up to us. As we reflect on Eli's story, we're called to consider the future we are building for others. Are we standing firm in our beliefs, or are we allowing small compromises to shape our legacy? Eli's journey shows us that our faith must be guarded with vigilance. Every decision to uphold our values, no matter how small, contributes to a legacy of integrity and trust. And every moment we choose silence in the face of wrongdoing can erode that foundation. For future generations, Eli's story serves as both a warning and a guide. It's a reminder to take our roles seriously, to honor the trust others place in us, and to ensure that our actions reflect the values we hold dear. Compromise may seem harmless, but Eli's life shows us the high price it can exact when left unchecked. As we close this chapter, Eli's story encourages us to look forward with purpose and integrity. Let us build a legacy that honors the principles we cherish, one that will stand strong for those who come after us. How can we take this lesson to heart and ensure that our lives reflect the faith we hold? As we reach the end of Eli's story, we are left with profound questions about our own lives, choices, and legacies. Eli's journey, filled with both honor and heartbreak, serves as a mirror for us all. What are we doing today to guard the legacy we hope to leave behind? How can we ensure that the values we cherish live on through our actions and the lives we touch? These reflections invite us to take a closer look at our own hearts, to consider the impact of our daily decisions. Eli's story reminds us that legacy is not built in a moment. It's shaped over a lifetime. It's the sum of our actions, decisions, and the values we uphold. Eli's silence, his compromise, and his love for his sons were all part of a story that ultimately led to both sorrow and powerful lessons. But even through his pain, Eli's life offers us wisdom, a call to take our responsibilities seriously and to protect what we hold sacred. Every decision we make, no matter how small, plays a role in the legacy we leave. Guarding our legacy means living with intention, embracing accountability, and being willing to make hard choices. Eli's life shows us the importance of addressing issues head-on rather than letting them grow unchecked. As we reflect on his story, we're encouraged to cultivate a life that reflects our faith, to uphold our values, and to protect the trust others place in us. For Eli, the consequences were severe, but his story stands as a reminder for us to learn from his journey and to build a future grounded in integrity. We are each given a unique role, a legacy to build and protect. Eli's experience is a call to all of us to consider the weight of our influence. Are we leading others closer to God, or are we allowing distractions and compromises to cloud our path? As we reflect on Eli's journey, we're reminded that our actions have far-reaching effects, that the choices we make today shape the stories others will tell tomorrow. Building a legacy of faith and integrity is not easy, but it is worth the effort. Eli's story challenges us to stand firm in our beliefs, to protect what we hold dear, and to be vigilant in our responsibilities. It's a reminder that every small choice counts, that each act of courage and faith leaves an imprint that goes beyond ourselves. Let Eli's story inspire us to protect our own legacy with devotion and care. As we conclude, we are invited to take these lessons to heart, to remember that our lives are a reflection of our values. May we strive to build a legacy that honors God, strengthens our faith, and leaves a lasting impact on those we love. Eli's story, though marked by sorrow, leaves us with wisdom for our own lives. We are reminded that our actions echo beyond ourselves, shaping the legacy we leave for those who come after us. Eli's journey invites us to reflect on our own choices, to ask ourselves if we're truly protecting what God has entrusted to us. Let us strive to build a life of integrity, one that honors the sacred and strengthens the faith of those around us. As we close this story, let's carry its lessons in our hearts and live out the values we cherish, knowing that each step of faith we take leaves a legacy of hope. As you reflect on Eli's life, may this prayer guide you. Lord, help us to lead lives that honor you, to make choices that reflect your love, and to leave a legacy of faith for those who come after us. Guard our hearts from compromise and strengthen us to protect what is sacred. Amen. If this message has inspired you, please share it with loved ones who might also find strength in these lessons. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more reflections that nurture the soul and deepen our walk with God.